Now, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has finally stepped down, ending a standoff lasting more than 2 weeks, while Barack Obama welcomed the move, saying that the voice of the people had been heard. But since America backed the fallen dictator and his 30-year regime, there are those who question the sincerity of the U.S. sentiments. RT's Gayanich Chakyan reports.
In the West, Mubarak's departure was hailed as a triumph of democracy.
For Egyptians have made it clear that nothing less than genuine democracy will carry the day.
The U.S. congratulates Egyptians for getting rid of a repressive leader. It's a big change after Washington sponsoring Hosni Mubarak for 30 years and turning a blind eye to widespread human rights violations in the country.
What have they been doing for the previous 30 years while Mubarak was actually torturing people and putting down, opposition by force?
Mubarak was a bad guy, but he was our bad guy. And as long as we had some element of control, that was good for us.
America's close ally is out of power, but some analysts say the U.S. is still pulling the strings.
The United States has a long-term alliance with Israel, a deep partnership with Egypt. We, as a country, have provided more than $100 billion in aid to both of these countries. There's a real investment here.
The force now in charge in Egypt is the country's military, largely financed by the United States. The army will be in power until Egyptians choose their next president. Egypt is the second largest recipient of American aid in the world after its neighbor Israel. The U.S. is pumping billions of dollars into the Egyptian military, which gives Washington huge control over the running of the country and its future. Although the official U.S. position is that it's up to the Egyptian people to choose their next leader, some analysts say it's very likely the country's next president will be subject to American approval.
What took place in Egypt was a military coup, and a military coup inside the army. Mubarak and Suleiman, of course, they are also military men, but they were being opposed by Annan, chief of the army, and Tantawi, the minister of defense. They have a very close relationship with the Pentagon. Tantawi is very, very close to Robert Gates. They talked on the phone at least 5 times this past week. So obviously, Washington will be supervising anything that happens.
Tahrir Square in Cairo now celebrates the end of rule by an autocratic leader who restricted political freedoms and damaged economic progress. So too did people on the streets of Kyrgyzstan and Ukraine in recent years after so-called democratic revolutions with Western approval. But the leaders who came to power were later rejected by their own people.
The tragedy of so many of these great people power revolutions has been that when the dust settles, people discover that their lives haven't been made much better. There's been just a change of faces in power rather than change regime.
Some say the lesson that the West could learn from recent revolutions is to abstain from supporting a leader just based on how convenient they are for the West, rather than how much they can do for their people. Ganesh Chekyan, RT, Washington, D.C.